factor is what's upstairs and, our brain housing group, right? It's like, what is us? So then really I'm the limiting factor, my comfort, my perceived suffering, my perceived limitations is the only thing that's stopping me from doing anything.
Welcome to the Mountain Tough Podcast, brought to you by Sig Sauer. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mountain Tough Podcast. I am Dustin Diefender, founder and CEO, and we love seeing you dive back into these episodes week after week. It is our goal to bring you inspiring guests that help you chase that purpose-filled life, that abundant life, that virtuous life. And each week we dig into the mindset and the mental tools from some of the best of the best. Before we dive into today's episode, if you haven't checked out the Mountain Tough app yet, we do have a special code for podcast listeners. The Mountain Tough code MTNPOD, all caps, all one word. That does get you 6 weeks free in the Mountain Tough app. So that's MTNPOD, and you can just go to mountaintough.com, click start free trial, and enter that code MountainPod. That gets you 6 weeks on the app. We wanted to get that out to all the podcast listeners, show appreciation for you guys checking out the show. And there's a lot of folks listening to this that have the app, that are doing the training, they're doing the dailies, the programs, and diving into some of the mental, spiritual, and nutritional content as well. But if you haven't checked out the app yet, that does get you 6 weeks. So you're going to start with a 14-day free trial, and that's going to give you an additional free month of training on Mountain Tough Plus. The app is available on all app stores, so iOS, Android, Roku. You can stream it anywhere so that you can train anytime, anywhere on Mountain Tough Plus, and that is the code MTNPOD. Transitioning to today's guest. Today's guest is Michael Rodríguez. He is the president and CEO of the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation. He joined the U.S. Army in 1992 and attended the Special Forces Assessment and Selection Course and became a Green Beret in 1997. He was in the military active up until 2013 when he was medically retired, and he's now the CEO of the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation. I got the chance to meet Rod at Winter Strong. I saw him there last year. I saw him again this year at Bert Sorenek's farm at the Winter Strong event. And I got the chance to hear his story and his passion and his purpose and his drive for what he is doing for the foundation. And after getting to talk to him a little bit after hearing him speak at Winter Strong, I knew he was a guest we had to get on the podcast. We were able to make that happen right away. We have a phenomenal conversation today that you're not going to want to miss. So stand by for my conversation with Michael Rodríguez. We should dive into your childhood and talk a little bit about what that looked like for you and where you grew up.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in southern New Mexico, in Las Cruces, New Mexico is the city down there. My family's from that part of New Mexico for generations. I like to joke around like southern New Mexico, like we weren't. Sometimes people ask, like, "Hey, when did you guys come to the United States?" And I don't take offense to that, right? When did your family come here? I'm like, well, we didn't cross the border. The border kind of crossed us, right? Because at one point that was Mexico. So. Yeah. From Las Cruces, New Mexico, it's where my family's from. One of the old family houses is probably about 250 meters from the border. So we were like really close to being on this side. So it's definitely a blessing. So that's where I grew up. I say it's a small town, but New Mexico's not very big. So it's the second largest city in New Mexico. But I grew up there. I'm the oldest of 4 boys, very active family, pretty active family as far as like, just when I say active family, I mean with each other. So that's one thing that was really, I think a lot of it is cultural for us growing up. is familia es primera, you know, family's first, and we're always there for each other.
Family's tight. Yeah, you guys are connected. You know, even talking to you at Winter Strong, the stuff that you guys are kind of doing, you could tell that it's a tight family.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, growing up, like I was fortunate to, I think even more unfortunate, a blessing. Like the men in my life were very stoic, hardworking men. All of them were veterans. You know, my father served in World War II, or I'm sorry, my father served in Vietnam. He served during the Tet Offensive, and then my grandfather served during World War II. A bunch of my great uncles, my grandma's brothers, you know, part of D-Day invasion. I mean, that's just what we did, but it wasn't something that they wore on their sleeve, and they never really talked about war per se. If they ever told the story, it would be about somebody they served with, right? It was always talking about the those to the left and the right, but very stoic, very quiet, reserved men that just worked hard. I mean, come from a laborer family, you know. And I'm not ashamed of that. You know, I don't think it's a problem. It's not an issue saying, "Hey, look, we work like with our hands. We work with our hands," and that's the family that I grew up in. So a lot of my guidance came from growing up as a child, came from, you know, those men in my life. Just good, strong, tight family. Men, you know, were working, but the women in my family are equally equally hard. I will say that much. I grew up with a healthy respect of women growing up, because my abuelita, my grandmother, my father's mother, thank the Lord she's still with us, and she's 97 years old. And I had a chance to go see her last week. But you know, Grandma Nacha, her name's Ignacia. Still runs the family, you know, because she's been around the longest.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a long life, 97.
Yeah, it is.
And did you, with that veteran father and grandfather, was it fairly early on that you knew you would probably go the military route?
Yeah, I think as far back as I can remember, aside from like having that every every child has the aspiration of being an astronaut. At least I think at one point in their life, aside from wanting to be an astronaut, um, I always thought that, I mean, that's what I wanted to do. You know, because when, like I talked about a minute ago, when my father, or you know, any of the men that served during war would talk about the war. Like I said, they didn't talk about war. It was never in a glamorization, but they would talk about, like, I would ask them about their friends, and they would always like get emotional, not like to the point where they're crying. You know, men of that era, just like you die before you cry type of belief, right?
Sure.
But it was just different, and they spoke with them with reverence and love, right? And I picked that up in their voices, and I would hear them talk about them and tell their stories. And I still remember their names. I still remember their stories. I remember where they grew up. You know, I'm listening to this when I'm like 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 years old.
Yeah.
And they spoke about them like familia, like family. So it inspired the hell out of me. I'm like, wow, who are these men? Who are they, and what, you know, I want to experience that for my own. I want to grow my familia, because that's how you, I think the greatest legacy, or the greatest thing you can do is grow your family in a good, positive way, impactful way. And that's what I wanted to do. You know, I wanted to be a father. I wanted to venture out and serve my country.
Yeah, to find men that left that big of a powerful impact on them, and you could see that just in their voice and their body language and how they talked about them. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Is because my father, all them those were my heroes. My heroes, my very first heroes was my father, and my grandfathers and my uncles, all my tios that served, and not because they served, but they were my heroes. I mean, we could have read comic books or any of that stuff. I didn't. I mean, I knew who Spider-Man was, and I knew that. I didn't live in a, you know, in a tent, but you know, I didn't have access to that stuff. So my heroes, by definition, you know, it is someone that inspires you, someone that provides you that, yeah, you know, not just inspiration, but that purpose, direction, and motivation that you carry throughout your life. And that was them. So when they talked about those others that they served with that inspired my heroes, man, that just meant meant the world to me, and I wanted to learn more.
And were you doing any sort of hunting as a kid?
Yeah, so hunting was very special in my family. So that, as I mentioned, all the men were in my family were worked, right, and my dad worked 7 days a week. He I mean, he took like a day off. The day I was born, but then worked, and it was just that's what they did. So the only time, but they love to hunt. That was the thing.
Mm-hmm.
They love to hunt. So in southern New Mexico, it's a little bit different hunting. And um, they would save up all year, and it was like deer hunting, and you'd put in, and it would be like a 3 or 4 day weekend, depending on which weekend you would go. And that was the only, I won't say it was the only time I saw my father. He would come home at night,
Huh.
but that was like where I get to spend time with dad, or if we had time during dove and quail season. So it was deer hunting, and dove and quail was what we hunted growing up. That was when I was just with my dad,
Yeah.
me. And then as my little brothers got older, then they would go. And that was just, going out there with my father. And, I love to go shooting with him. Introduction of firearms and the safety that's necessary around them, but the training as well, not just, I have a healthy respect of firearms because I was trained at a very young age at the consequences of what could happen. So hunting was very special because that meant it was very bonding moments for me growing up with my father, because it was really the only time that I would see him, that many days in a row and have all day with him. So
That
it was a
quality
lot. It
time.
was very special.
Yeah. That quality time is priceless.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And it wasn't all like touchy feely stuff, or it wasn't like a big coddling session. Like, no, it was like, all right, you get up super early, and we didn't have the best equipment. I think about like when, like actually, I thought about this when we were at Winter Strong. I was in my tent, I had this super nice sleeping bag on this super nice sleeping pad, and I'm sitting there, and I was like, man, I started thinking about when I was a kid. And I'm like, we didn't have any of that stuff, like sabia, like blankets and ponchos and it's extra stuff. I mean, it was just,
Just
but it
freezing.
was fine. Yeah, yeah. And we go up there, and then you had an assignment. You walk up with dad. You quiet. And when I say I had spent time with him, it's not like we were talking a lot, because you got to be quiet. It's just like I'm with him. I just wanted
Mm-hmm.
to be around him.
It's so
And
true.
hunting, yeah. In southern New Mexico, it's the hunting. As I'm sure you guys know, a lot of your listeners, but it's like I didn't know what I didn't know what a tree stand was till I was like, I think I was in the army. Right? I had never even heard of that thing. It's like, all right, there was a plan. Like they would, like, we're going to walk the ridge. My father would sit there, and it was like a straight up mission brief, right? We'd sit on the top, on the hood of whatever vehicle we drove to the walk-in point. Okay, we're going to walk here. We look at the map, and he would tell us, you're going to go here. This is your point. I want you to be sure you walk through here. And then that's what we did as kids is, we would wait a certain amount of time, whatever time they told us to wait. And then the men would go up on the ridges of the valleys, whichever ones we decided to go based off the sign and all the recce we did before.
Yep.
And then when we were, okay, we've been waiting long enough in the dark. Okay, now we just slowly start walking, and we would walk in pairs, and then just drive. That was what we did.
Yep.
It was drive the game up, so then they could,
Get shots at the top.
get the shot. Yeah, yeah. A lot of walking.
That's how my childhood was too. I remember so many times hunting with my dad and uncles, so cold and just freezing because we didn't have any of the high quality rain gear. I don't even think we had rain gear. Your jacket was just wet.
No.
And we had Walmart tents and Walmart sleeping bags and just freezing every trip we took.
Yeah, like a joyful freeze, man.
Yeah.
But I was so happy. I was so like the crappiest socks. I mean, I didn't know what any of that it was, but I enjoyed it. And even like the food, I remember opening like cans of like Vienna sausages,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that gelatinous stuff would come out, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so great. And it's crumbled crackers, because I didn't pack them right in my little school bag. So my bags, we would like use our school bags.
Yeah.
Like whatever school backpack we had, that was the backpack you used to pack your stuff. And then when you went up there, that was what you used to carry your equipment. So I remember getting my ass chewed out because I put the crackers on the bottom, and my job was, but I crushed them. So then everyone's pissed off because I crushed our little sleeve of saltine crackers, but yeah, all those memories is just awesome. And I was actually thinking about them, like I said, when we were at Winter Strong recently, and it wasn't even that cold. And I'm like all bundled up like an old man,
Yeah. I remember my friend's dad, he would pull out those cans of Vienna sausage and he would like eat them in his garage. And I was like traumatized from that as a kid. Those things just had the nastiest look coming out of those little cans.
They were gross.
Yeah.
They were nasty. And another thing I remember, we would, as far as food, so I'm a little long in the tooth. I turned 50 here in a couple months. So we had sea rations, like the old Army sea rations. So they would, one of my uncles was in the National Guard. So we would get these sea rations, and man, I had how people lived on that. But as a kid, I was like, yeah, it was great. It was so awesome, you know, but man, that's some, I don't know.
The stuff you can eat when you're hunting, it's amazing what you can eat when you're out in the wild. Like everything tastes fine and you're just so hungry. And then if you ever try to eat any of that stuff when you're at your house, you just can't even choke it down. It's so bad.
No, not at all. Not at all. You know, it's a novelty when people eat it, but if that's what you're eating and you look at it from an outside point of view, it's probably not, it's not great food. And the MREs, the stuff that's the service members eat today, are way better than before, and that's awesome. I'm not like throwing shade at them. I'm happy that they get to eat better than we did, but man, it was bad. It was, some of that stuff was like, I think of like some of the very first, like the menu 1 through 12, the very first MREs that I ate in the Army when I was deployed to Somalia in '93, and I remember, I know the numbers by heart. You know, I mean, and I was a young private. I was 18 years old, so I always ended up with like the corned beef hash or the nasty omelet, or, you know, I like the tuna with noodles, but those are the ones that nobody ever wanted. I never, my entire deployment to Somalia, never did I get spaghetti, and that was the one that everyone loved.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of chicken a la king and a bunch of, like, anyway.
Oh man, yeah, those things are hit or miss for sure. Well, let's jump into your military career and walk through what that looked like. You joined in '92. Let's go through it. Did you just walk in and enlist?
Yeah. So, so people remember like Desert Storm, what was going on like in 1991, and I was a senior in high school in '91, and I wanted to join. I was like, oh my gosh, but I was younger. I was like 16 years old, my senior year, so I had to wait. So then, by the time I was eligible to join at 17, the war was over, but I was like, I still wanted to go, right? And I convinced my mom and dad to sign the paperwork to allow me to enlist when I was 17 years old, and then, you know, headed off to Fort Sill, Oklahoma in June of 1992. That's pretty much started my military career. When I enlisted, I wanted to be like an airborne ranger, because I watched, there was this show called World of Valor, and they would talk about like Green Berets and SEALs and Army Rangers. And they had Marine Recon. There was like 4 different episodes. I had ordered the VHS tapes and everything, right? Because I'd seen it, and I watched it, and I was like, I've always wanted to be a Special Forces Green Beret, because I love the just what they did. They did a lot. They do a lot. But back then you couldn't go right in like you can these days. So I was like, well, it just makes sense. I'll go to Ranger Battalion for a bit and then go. But I got sold a bill of goods and say, hey, look, here's pick this job. It's airborne. When you get to airborne school, the Ranger recruiter will come around, and if you want to go to, it was called RIP back then, then they'll select you. And I'm like, okay. So I signed on that online. I was an air defense guy. I was a Stinger, man probe air defense guy. I remember that day at airborne school, like basic AT jump school. I show up. I was like the first one there. And there's the Ranger guy was there in his black berets back then. And he was like, all right, what's your job? What's your MOS? And I told him. He was like, what the hell is that? And I explained it to him. I was like, then it was 16 Sierra. It's now 14 Sierra. I'm a Stinger. He was like, no, we don't fucking need you. We teach infantry guys. Get the hell out of here. I'm like,
oh man.
Oh my gosh. Like everything just crumbled, you know, the young 18-year-old. But it worked out in my favor, I think, because then I ended up getting sent to Fort Drum, New York. And then, you know, in '93, I got deployed to Somalia. Not as an air defense guy. Obviously, there was no air threat over there, but they needed more infantry guys in infantry battalions, and they just needed people. They're like, hey, go report to 2nd Brigade. Wherever they need you, they're going to put you. So that's what I did.
crazy. That's wild. Yeah, it's wild how we can't really. I mean, it's the cliche. It's the comment of like God laughs at our plans. It happens every day.
Yeah, we think we have a plan. Like I think my son and I were talking about that, like life's plan, like how we believe the Lord has a plan for you, and you may not always understand it, but you can't wait for that plan to just manifest. You have to be moving in a direction. If you're complacent, then you're not taking advantage. And if you change direction on your path, that is still forward. Like people think like, oh, I was going this way, but now I have to go this way. I'm not. No, you're still facing the direction you should be going. So my oldest son, it was actually right before he deployed. We had a really long conversation about that and the path of life, because this deployment he wasn't anticipating, it came up, and we started talking about that. And anyway, so yeah, the Lord has a plan for us. We really believe about that.
Yeah, we can control the output, but we can't really control the outcome.
No, you're right. I'm gonna write that down. I like that. I can control the output. I just can't control the outcome.
Yeah,
and yeah, that's real clever. I like that.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a second and talk to you about nutrition and supplementation. There are a plethora of options when it comes to supplements that can be kind of overwhelming, so I wanted to let you guys know what I do take. So in the mornings, I am taking the Mountain Ops greens and the collagen right when I wake up, and that has been a game changer. I don't eat a lot of vegetables throughout the day, so adding those greens in the morning is quick and efficient, and I can really feel the collagen. In addition, I do enhance my workouts. My Mountain Tough training sessions are quite difficult, and so I do like to take the Enduro. It gives you a cardio enhancement that you can actually feel. And then I also like a little caffeine with my workout, so I'm taking the Mountain Ops Ignite. Lastly, it's really important that you are getting enough protein and recovering after these difficult sessions. What I do know is even following a strict whole foods diet, I'm not getting nearly enough protein on most days unless I take a supplement. So I do take the Mountain Ops protein after my workout to make sure that I'm hitting about 1 gram per body weight for a functional athlete. So taking the Mountain Ops protein with some creatine after my workouts has been huge. Those are the products I am taking and that I recommend. The Mountain Ops team is giving Mountain Tough podcast show listeners an exclusive discount to their products. It is a great deal. So for a first-time purchase on mountainops.com, you do get 20% off. All you need to do is go to mountainops.com and then use the code MountainTough at checkout. That's MTNTOUGH. All caps, all one word. Apply that as your promo code at checkout, and you're going to get 20% off your first order. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. So, Somalia at that time, was that the Black Hawk Down time frame?
No, I probably, when I say Somalia, I always have to start with that. Like, I was not there during Black Hawk Down. I left right before that occurred.
Okay,
that's what people think. And in that October of '93, when all that went down, I was part of everything prior to that, and we left like right after there was this a big some stuff going on, and I left right before a lot of that stuff popped off.
Got it. And then where did you head from there?
So I went back to drum, and then and not many people remember this, but in 94, just shortly after that, there was a military coup in Haiti, and there was another force. It was that was called Operation Restore Democracy. The military leader at that time took over. So then there was this massive effort to, okay, well, we have to restore democracy. So I was part of the back then it was called the DRF, the Division Ready Force. So when things pop off across the globe, the 18th Airborne Corps, the United States Army 18th Airborne Corps has the largest sizable force that can be deployed anywhere, and it's primarily the 82nd Airborne. But there's other special units like the Rangers, but they're much smaller. But as far as a sizable force, it's the 18th Airborne Corps. Like if the president wants to do something, and there's no shade at my Devil Dog brothers and Marines or anything like that, but the phones ring here at Fort Bragg. That's what happens.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was part of we were on call at that point. So they flew the brigade I was attached to down to Norfolk, Virginia, put us on the USS Eisenhower, basically, and put us where they would put Marines for a landing force, and put all our helicopters on there. And then we started on our way down. And then I believe there were two aircraft carriers. There was a special operations one as well as JSOC guys, us, and there were SF guys and other people already in country at the time. But then circling overhead was the Rangers and the 82nd, just ready to pop in. And I remember right before we went on that, before we actually initiated the operation, I mean, we were right there. We had 3 ROE cards, like rules of engagement cards. One was red, white, and black. And each of them, we didn't know how we were going in. Were we going in like, all right, if we see a threat, eliminate the threat, or were we going in with flowers in our hair? Right? How are we going in here?
Yeah.
And as a young soldier, all of us were like, oh my gosh, hope we going in, black. We were hoping for black. And that sounds bad. Like, not a bunch of warmongers, but like, all right, we're training for this. Let's go. There's some bad stuff going on. People are dying. Let's do what we got to do. But then, the Reverend Jesse Jackson and former President Jimmy Carter told the guy, as well as some military leadership, they're like, look, if you don't surrender right now, like, all of you are going to die. Like, this is it. Like, this is not good for you. So, we went in to try to restore democracy and help them set up. So everybody else went home, but we were there at the conventional force. So then we still went in, and I was there for about 9 months, just helping them get the government back on, just security and stuff. And
you're still super young at this time.
Yeah, I think I was 20 years old on my second deployment. So we finished that up. Then I went back to drum, and that's when I was a specialist in E4. And back then you had to be E4 promotable before you went to selection. I had made sergeant, and I really loved my unit, and I was a team chief at that point. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna, I was getting near the end of my initial enlistment, and I think everyone kind of goes through this. Even I think all lifers do. They're like, okay, maybe I want to go home. I was the first one to be. I mean, all the men like served, but everybody went home. So there was that tradition: go do what you got to do. I had 2 deployments. Come home to the familia. And I was like, I just didn't want to walk away. So I actually was able to get I got stationed at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico, which is like 20 minutes from my home. It's like on the other side of the mountains from Las Cruces.
Crazy.
So I got there, and I was with familia. My first child was born. I had just gotten married. So I was there, but something in me was like, I need to do more. I didn't feel. While I was at White Sands, all I did was shoot down F4s, like the old aircraft with Stingers. It was cool,
yeah,
but it was just that wasn't me.
I
needed to do more. Yeah, it was pretty boring. But something in me said I need to do more. So that's when I was like, I'm going to go to selection. And then right before I went to selection, we had a hunting trip with my dad, and part of my train up was that, I was running. I was old enough where I didn't have to drive, right? Like be the kids down there, but I was with the kids. I'm like, come on, let's figure this out. So running up and down, and then I would run up, and then, I really I took advantage of the opportunity to train, and then went to selection right afterwards. And I was fortunate enough to be selected.
And that was Green Beret selection.
Yep.
Special Forces.
Yeah. Out here at Camp McCall in North Carolina.
Okay. How was that experience for you?
It was. I loved it. I'll be honest. Because what I loved about that one is it's just you. I mean, like the first couple of weeks is just individual evaluation, and some of the events, like they show up at this. They say, hey, where do you got to be at what time and with what and wearing what? Okay, and then you show. You have no idea what you're going to do. So you'd show up, and it could be like, hey, running shoes, your BDUs, bloused, which is like the old uniforms, like roll them up, and that was it. And so then you're like, okay, we're gonna go on a run, and then you'd show up, and there's a cone, and then the instructions were like, hey, here's a cone, follow the cones, This is a timed event. You're going to be evaluated. They didn't tell you how long you're running. They didn't tell you how far. They didn't tell you any time standard. They're like, all right, ready, go. And you could be running 2 miles. You could be running, I don't know, 10 miles. You have no idea. You're like, okay, how do you pace yourself with that, right? But
Yeah.
I'm just going to go. I'm going to give everything I have. So I love that environment. Sometimes it was a rush. Sometimes it was just a lot of different things, land navigation, a lot of different things. I enjoyed that.
Mm.
And then when we get to team week at the end, then that's where like really, then you had to work in teams. They would put someone in charge of an event, and you had to negotiate it. And they all suck. There's nothing fun about them, right? But there's like a problem. So there was thinking involved.
Mm.
And I think that's why I like the individual week, because there's thinking involved. It's a mental game. It's a mind game. It's like, okay, you got physical, but like, it really tested your mental psyche. Like, what do you think you can do? And then what are you willing to push yourself past? Like, okay, we have our own limits, but then do you have more?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have more? Do you have more? Do you have more? And you just keep pushing. And that's where I love that. And when we got to team week, I saw a lot of people that didn't prepare, right?
Mm-hmm.
They fell off. People would quit, or people would get hurt, right? And leave. But during team week was really like, wow, how did someone like not prepare for this? And it just shows like level of commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no deviation from standards. If someone was not putting out, then you didn't meet the standards at the end. They didn't select you. Or what I liked about the end was you would do peer evals. So if you're in a team, they're evaluating as much as they can, but the team is going to see how that person is performing. So you get evaluated on what they can't see, but then also I think the true value in the peer evaluations that you would put out for your team is that you would rank everybody.
Yeah.
Is to see if some of them just don't work together. You don't work well together, then nothing against you. This isn't not for you. So
yeah,
it was enjoyable. I liked it a lot.
Did you see any themes of why the guys that were quitting? What was the biggest reason they were dropping off?
Preparation. I think some people there. So I would say it's two things: preparation, and they were there for the wrong reasons. You should prepare. I mean, I don't think any of us should face anything in life without preparation, because then that's neglect. I mean, you're just like, do you really care if you didn't prepare? Preparation, lack of preparation, but then also the wrong reason. Some people wanted to do that because of, the perceived or real accolades they might get, or it's a status thing, or like, hey, I want to stand next to something shiny, but I don't want to do anything to do it, right? I don't want to make it shiny. I just want to be there and not do the work. So I think that if you go into something you're not committed to, that really challenges you, you won't be successful. If you don't have a plan, you're not prepared, and you don't really want to do it, then you're probably not going to be successful at all. I mean, no one's going to give you anything that's worth earning.
Yeah.
And that's what I really loved about it, was like every one of us earned that. And that's, you're looking at each other and you can be honest, and like honesty is very, something I think lacks in society today, but I loved it. I really did enjoy that environment quite a bit.
Yeah, you have that strong why, and you can endure almost anyhow. And if you don't have that, like anything in life, if you don't have that strong why driving you for the right reasons, a lot of people won't put up with that much pain and suffering.
Yeah, and it's just everything has a price, right? And sometimes it's discomfort. Sometimes it's a lot of discomfort, and I don't even, like, I stopped using the word suffering a while ago, and I'll talk about why. So when I was hospitalized, I was and I'm very open about this, but I was in a psychiatric facility for post-traumatic stress and chemical dependency. And I remember one day it was after I was at Walter Reed for some physical. Anyway, during my transition out of the Army after I got injured, the last time, my psychiatrist asked me, he goes, "Rod, are you suffering?" And I'm in a psychiatric facility. I got, slippers and pajamas, no strings and anything. And it's just like, and it was a locked facility. There's a lot better facilities for better now. It was just different some years ago. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm suffering. I go, absolutely, I'm suffering. He goes, you're choosing to suffer. And I'm like, what? what do you mean I'm suffering? I'm choosing to suffer. He goes, if you are suffering, what has happened is the pain that you're exposed to, the obstacles you're facing, they are controlling you. They're causing that suffering in your mind, that mental, you are choosing to suffer. And he's like, pain is reality. Because there's a certain individual that nobody exists painless unless they're not here anymore.
Yeah.
I said, pain is a reality. Struggle is a reality. Obstacle is going to be there the rest of your life. But if you're suffering, then you've lost control and you're giving power to something that you should take power over. And that, like, I'll never forget that moment. It like completely changed how I looked at, like I said, I don't even use the word anymore, but completely changed my view on stuff. Now, keep in mind, at that point when I was there, I was about almost 20 years in service at that point, and I had served, I had deployed, I have them 10 deployments. I mean, I'm not saying I was the baddest dude out there, but I had done my work at that point and served at the apex of my career. I've done it, just all I could possibly do, but I could still grow.
Yeah,
I could still learn, and facing that was very just how you look at it. It's just, and I don't suffer. I mean, I deal with stuff, of course. I fight it, yeah, but I'm not suffering.
Man, that's profound. That's so helpful, because a lot of the suffering is going on inside our own mind, like the enemy is in me. It's like we're creating some of these problems in our own mind, which is leading to that suffering instead of going to a solution.
Yeah, it's choosing to suffer over choosing exactly what you said, a solution, and it's self-inflicted. I really wish that people could see the gift they were given by walking around in these machines that we have, the human body. It is the more people, I wish more people learned about how resilient and strong we really are. Like the human, it just like, I mean, it's as simple, like everyone can understand. Is like if you have a break in your skin, your body knows to send more platelets and clotting factors to that area, or an injury. Or if you have something, the body knows to swell to kind of brace, like an injury, to brace that area. I mean, the brain knows that. I'm not consciously telling my body to do that, but it's such a beautiful and efficient machine.
Mm-hmm.
The only limiting factor is what's upstairs in our brain housing group, right? It's like what is us. So then really I'm the limiting factor. My comfort, my perceived suffering, my perceived limitations is the only thing that's stopping me from doing anything. And I really wish people knew, or maybe respected, these beautiful meat suits that we got, that there's walking around in, and take care of them more. If you understood how precious this vessel is that we were gifted, I think it had a little more grace. They would probably take care of it more. The more you take care of your body, the more happier you're going to be, the more functional you're going to be, the more you're going to contribute to society as a whole. So yeah,
it's wild. Yeah, it's pretty insane that the self-talk we can do in our own head can control the whole narrative of our lives, and that self-talk can go positive or negative real fast if we're not paying attention to our thoughts.
Yeah.
Let's back up. Let's back up a hair and go through a little bit of the history of how you got to that point, because we got up through selection and now you're a Green Beret, but you still have 8 deployments to go before you are in Walter Reed.
All right. I like to breeze over that.
Yeah.
I'm just an older guy, man, just trying to do his part every day. But yeah, so I get to I go through the Q course. When I got selected, I was selected as to become an 18 Delta, which is a Special Forces medical sergeant, and that's like 2+ years of training. Some of the other jobs are a little less, and for me, I was just like, oh, it's going to take me longer to get a team, but you know what? Okay, cool. I'll do that. And I'm glad I did. It's tremendously, man, super challenging. During the Q course, you're still challenged physically all the time. And yeah, selection was that initial part, but selection is ongoing. At any time, they'd be like, you know what? You're out. We still did peers. There were still gateways to meet. There were still standards to meet, and we would lose guys all the time. for example, my 18 Delta class, we started with, I think, 70 some guys, almost 80 guys, and there was like 13 of us, 12 of us that made it. Now, when guys would fail out the 18 Delta course, I think they picked it basically off our ASVAB scores, like if you do good on a test, you know, that when you join the military.
Yeah.
Because it's academically like a man, a punch in the throat. I mean, it is a lot. It is a lot of academic work, school work, and then also all the physical stuff. And they're still kicking you in the teeth, right? So when guys fill out 18 Delta, they would, well, let's send them to the next challenging course, which was the 18 Echo, which was the communications guy, because they were still teaching Morse code at that point. So anyway, I go through that. It's 2+ years of training. Fortunately, I didn't have to go to SEER school, which is the survival school, because I had an opportunity to go to it right after my first deployment in Somalia. And that school was basically for, you know, Special Forces guys, the 160th pilots, Ranger Battalion, and some other guys, you know, some LRS guys, long range reconnaissance guys. But I got to go after my Somalia deployment because it was during block leave. And they were like, hey, who wants to go to the survival school, but you're going to miss leave? And back then, like, you took leave then or you didn't.
Yeah.
And I was a young private. I hungered for more. I've always hungered for more. I'm like, I'll go. I won't go home. And I volunteered, and I didn't know anything. I was survival school. Cool. I'll go. That sounds fun. I didn't know anything about it.
Oh.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I'm an air defense guy. I go down there. They're doing the introductions. And I was a PFC at that point, private first class E3. And there's all these E7s and warrants and some officers and, you know, all these like dudes that I wanted to be, because I recognized them in their uniforms. I'm like, oh my gosh, all these black and green berets and these pilots of this unit that I didn't even know about, but they're like the best on the planet. And I'm like, holy crap. And then they get to me and I'm like, you know, and I told them who I was. They're like, what are you doing here? I'm like, they asked me if I wanted to go to survival school. And they're like, oh man, you're going to have fun. I had no idea, but it was awesome. I loved it. I ended up getting all the extra training, because when you get to the POW, like prison camp version of that, it's like 3 days. The youngest in the class gets the extra treatment. They call him the war baby. And at that point, some of the instructors in SEER school were, one of them was there, a guy named Dan Pitzer. He was a POW in Vietnam for 7 years, and he was an instructor. So this guy spent 7 years as a POW in Vietnam. And he was there.
That's
he wasn't at the prison camp, but they were doing all the prep work before that. So it was amazing. So during the prison camp, I was the war baby, of course, and of course I had to go through in the winter, so it was super cold. So I got all the extra training.
Just getting hammered, man.
But it was fun. I mean, it was definitely worth it. So when I graduated Q course, you know, I didn't have. There was 1 month I didn't have. I got to the team faster than everybody else, and I remember my first initial in brief with my team sergeant was, you know, all right, you get your initial counseling. And there's one thing he said to me that has always stuck with me. This is another moment in my life where I was like, oh, what the hell? Like, he was a big spooky guy and mean. And I'm glad he wasn't liked by anyone, but he was very efficient in his job. He wasn't there to make friends. He was there to lead. And I was like, okay, I can respect that. And I was one of the, you know, smarter guys that when I graduated course, it didn't matter what I knew. I knew I didn't know shit. Because I'm going to on an ODA with guys that had done a lot. And he told me something, and the first thing he said, he goes, you know, Rod, there's something you need to know about being on an ODA. He goes, or being on an NSF team. He goes, if things are effed up, it's your fault. And I'm like, my fault? I don't know shit. Well, how's it my fault? I'm like, okay, Top, roger that. And then he went on to a bit more, and I thought about it, and it took me a while to really figure out what the hell he meant. And what he meant was, if things are screwed up and it's still your fault because you're not, you allowed it to get screwed up. That means you always should be contributing. So that was probably the nicest thing he's ever said to me, was that, because what he did in that statement was tell me, you have value, you have input. So if we're screwed up, you weren't contributing. But I didn't take it as that. I took it like, oh my gosh, like
what I do.
It took me, I don't know shit. What do you want me to do? And he would give me these impossible tasks. Like, I don't know. He goes, hey, Rod, I need you to jet an aircraft to for this training, whatever. And I'm like, I don't even know what jet means. I'm like, okay, so where do I go? Figure it out. I'm like, shit. So him giving me that Mission Impossible forced me to learn the system, but then also introduce myself to the rest of how everything worked, the other ODAs, headquarters elements, like everything. And I always thought, like, man, this guy's a dick. But he was just training me, and that was his. I always reflect back to him on a lot of leadership lessons I picked up from him.
Teaching you that ownership too.
Yeah, it was yeah. It's funny. It's like that's kind of that when our team grows at what I do now, the foundation. I don't say it like that, but I say the exact same thing. Like, if we're screwed up, it's your fault. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, let me explain it to you. Right? I do a little bit differently.
With a little bit more politeness on it nowadays. I've used a ton of Bluetooth speakers over the years, and they all have never quite had enough output for me to really have an awesome home gym workout on a Bluetooth speaker. But the Turtle Box is in a whole new ball game. They have leveled up this product, so the bass and the output you get out of a Turtle Box is quite amazing. It's funny how we started using them at the lab. We had an awesome sound system at our new lab here in Bozeman. We were using it so much, we actually blew our brand new system out. We went right to the Turtle Boxes. And so we paired two together in the lab. And that was a lot of output for the Mountain Tough team and all of our testing to have phenomenal sound in our gym for a great workout with great music. We know there's a ton of Mountain Toughers training in their basements, in their garages, and I know a lot of you are looking for great sound to play some music in the background to your MGDs or your kettlebell diesel. This is a great product for you to check out. Turtle Box is at a whole new level. The bass and the volume you can get out of that box. It's a sweet product. You guys can check them out at turtleboxaudio.com. Again, that's turtleboxaudio.com. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. So, where'd you go from there?
So I was assigned to 7th Special Forces Group, and then the area of operations for us was Central and South America. And this is pre 9/11. So my first deployment was to Colombia to do counter narcotic stuff. Some of the things that go down there and train some Colombians and like do some work with them. That was my first deployment. And then shortly after that, we were getting ready for our second deployment. I think I was going to Bolivia or Peru. Anyway, somewhere in South America. We were getting ready for that one. And then 9/11 happened, and then things kind of changed a little bit. But the mission demand was still relevant and necessary down in South America. So we still could go down there. So I ended up still going to, had a few more deployments to like Panama, Bolivia, Peru. And then we started getting more in the rotation of to Afghanistan and deploying over there for the remainder of my career.
Okay. Where were you at when 9/11 happened?
I was actually at group headquarters, since group headquarters in a basement, taking a class. And me and a guy graduated Q course was sitting next to me, and I remember they came in. They're like, "Hey, you guys," because it was like a briefing room, and they're like, "Hey, you guys need to get that file. We think we're at war." And I'm like, "Okay." So we left, and I remember I got in my truck, and that's when people listen to the radio, right? I even hear it, but the Levi Rogers was the guy I was with. He was in front of me. We were driving back to the company area, like where our office was, where the team room was. And he gets out of his car, like right in the middle of the road. He runs to me because I'm behind him. He goes, "Dude, did you hear that?" I go, "What?" He goes, "A plane crashed." I'm like, okay, all right. And then he runs back in there, and he gets back in his car, and we drive up. And as I'm walking into the company area, the second plane hit the tower. And that's when they're like, "Look, hey, you guys, call your families. Tell them to be safe. We don't know what's going on, but you're not gonna be home for a bit." So
something.
That's what happened there. Yeah.
Crazy. And was it one deployment that you got severely injured on, or was it injuries on several different deployments?
it was a multiple injuries, but some of my injuries too. Like I think it's important to when you talk about veterans and injuries and some of the stuff we deal with the whole service is some of the times that happens in training, right? In order to perform dangerous things, you got to do dangerous stuff to do it. You know, there's I think the 5 Marines and 2 National Guardsmen that we lost, in those two helicopter crashes, 7 this year alone, right? It's dangerous. Like just doing that every day. The men and women that wear the uniform of this nation, they're standing ready to defend us all, are training, and they're doing dangerous stuff where they could lose their life. So some of my injuries were, in training, like standing too close to a breaching charge. You put a very large charge onto a wall, and an explosive charge, and everybody gets excited, right? In CQB, they're like, okay, we're just going and we're training. So everyone gets up, and if you're number one, you put that charge, you try and push people back, and they've all pushed up at you. It's night, and then you hear the countdown, and and you're like, oh, I guess so you look away, open your mouth, and hope you don't blow your eardrums, and it goes off. And sometimes, I remember one time, like I don't remember anything. I remember walking up, putting a breaching charge, and then I remember waking up, and the senior medic of the company was standing over me, like I was late. I'm like, what happened? They're like, you got blown up, and it was funny at that point, right? I'm like, oh man. But a lot of my injuries I collected over the years were brain injuries, like traumatic brain injuries, multiple. So that's where I probably lived a life that people shouldn't live with regard to brain injuries. I grew up boxing. I used to do it quite a bit. Not that saying boxing's bad. I mean, I train with my youngest son in boxing today, but back then people didn't really understand the long-standing effects of multiple brain injuries over a period of time. It was, dementia pugilistica, I think, when I was a kid, and then it became chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And anyway, long-winded way of me of saying I had some in training, but then some were, through exposure through IEDs. And I was fortunate that every time I got blown up with IEDs in particular, I could joke around like a roach, man. I probably should have died, but I kept coming back. And for whatever reason, I'm still here. I think it's just I'm a thin guy. I don't know why. I'm not going to try and understand why. The Lord has a reason for me to be here.
Wow.
So a lot of those added up until the last deployment where I had 3 significant injuries within a very short period of time. I lost vision in my left eye. I was fortunate as a medic, whenever I would get injured, I would take care of I treat myself because I didn't want to leave the team. And when I say that, like, I was screwed up. Like the last time I got blown up, I lost vision in my left eye, but I patched myself up. I still have an eye, but it just didn't work anymore. But I wasn't going to say anything because I could patch it up and, oh, I'm good. Okay, you're good. You say you're good. And there's nothing special about that. And I hope people, if anybody listens to this, they don't think like it's, oh, that's cool, that's superhuman. I go, no, it's not. Really, and the way I can understand it is everybody knows what kickball is, right? Like you play kickball as kids. I mean, that was like the funnest game. If you say kickball, people always have like an emotional thought. When you just say the word kickball, people are like, oh man, it takes everybody back to the childhood.
Best game.
So when everyone is just think about it, like you're 8 years old, you're having the best kickball game of your life. I mean, you're just like doing great. No one's catching your pop flies. I mean, you're doing awesome. You're running around, you fall down, skin your knee. You're able to get up and continue to play kickball. Do you stay and play kickball? Absolutely.
Yep.
That was all I did. So there's nothing special about that. So I stayed. I knew after that deployment, I was going to go be an instructor, a sniper instructor. And I was like, oh, I'll get some time as an instructor and I'll heal up. I'll be okay. Because even back then, the belief was like, hey, brain injuries get better with time. And there was no database. No one was taking baseline tests before those deployments. And it didn't, when I went on, things just got worse. My vision slowly started to come back, but my eyes turned into a married couple. So they stopped communicating. So I had horizontal diplopia, double vision. I mean, all kinds of other stuff going on with me. And it continued to progress until I couldn't hide it anymore. And then I got sent to Walter Reed, and that's when they did a full assessment and gave me everything and pretty much ended my career.
Man. And was part of Walter Reed PTSD related also?
Yeah. And so I'll talk about that. When I went to the National Intrepid Center of Excellence, it's called NICO. and it's like the gold standard. So they do a head to toe assessment, and they found I left with like 17 different diagnoses. And when I was, it's a whole team of doctors, like the best like the best they can find, and it's a very holistic way of treatment and assessment. It's just an amazing place, and like I really, it's one of the places that saved my life. And they were going through the assessment. They're like, "Hey, look, you have this. You have, we can't diagnose it yet because chronic traumatic encephalopathy isn't. You can't diagnose that until necropsy. They don't have we don't have the technology to do a scan and say, yeah, you got CTE. We think you have that because I started developing. I have Parkinsonisms, like I have these little tremors, the beginnings of Parkinson's, which is a sign. And they were like, okay." They're like, you're looking at early onset Alzheimer's, dementia, early 50s. Like I told you, I turned 50 here in a couple months.
Oh, man.
All these things they were telling me. I'm like, all right, cool. Didn't bother me at all. I'm like, all right, yep, all right, I'll face that. All right, cool. I got that. I'll figure that out. And then they're like, and you're chemically dependent, because I told them I'm honest. I was like, yeah, I drink every day. Every day. I mean,
Alcohol.
and they're like, okay, yeah. And I'm like, all right, yeah, that's true. But then, and they do this, and it's smart for them to do it this way. The last thing they said, and you have, then they get into the mental health stuff, and they're like, hey, you have severe depression, agoraphobia, and you have post-traumatic stress disorder. And I got pissed, and I was like, "F you, you got post-traumatic. I don't have that. I was like, no, I don't. Like, I don't. I just refuse to think I did because again, this was 2011, 12. It was still, there was a stigma attached to it, a heavy stigma. And it still exists today, unfortunately. And I didn't want to believe that. But they're like, look, we can't even address any of the medical stuff we need to take care of until you go get help. I'm like, what does help look like? What do you mean? Well, we have an inpatient medical treatment facility we want to send you to. It's a dual diagnosis, address your post-traumatic stress and chemical dependency. I go, what does inpatient mean? They're like, inpatient. Like, because they're here, they're like, no, we have to send you somewhere else specializes in it. And so I was like, okay, I really didn't want to go. I was like, is it voluntary? They're like, well, we really think. And then I was lucky that my, so in SOCOM, you have something called a care coalition advocate. And that's a guy that, or gal that manages your case. Well, my care coalition advocate at that time had been my command sergeant major of my battalion when I got wounded, during my last deployment. Profound respect and love for that gentleman. And he told me, go, bullshit, you're doing it. And I'm like, all right, I'll do it.
That was a blessing.
Yeah, because of Pete Hobbit, I went ahead and did it. And again, another person that saved my life. I don't think I give him enough credit for it.
Yeah.
But I go down there for a 4-week program. They keep me 8 weeks because I needed the additional training. But I'm glad. I'm really happy I got to go down there and do that because it set me on the right path moving forward. And provided me again that purpose, direction, motivation that I needed.
And they were specifically working on your mental health and alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. That's what the focus was. I used to be, I was a pretty angry guy. Tendencies for violence. And I needed it. And I'm not ashamed to say any of that stuff. That I've been on antipsychotics. I've been on just about everything that you could imagine. And those are tools. All that medication was necessary for me. I'm not saying I was being poisoned. I'm not someone that's going to fall into that, that narrative, because I know me, and I know that those things stop me from doing certain things. I don't need them anymore because I continue to challenge myself and push and try to grow past it. But I needed them.
Yeah.
So I think I really wish people, when they talk about medication, would look at it from a more pragmatic view, as opposed to, it's poison, to killing you. Well, it has certain effects. Be smart about it. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't for you. But for some of us, it's needed. And I don't know if I'd be here if they hadn't given me what they gave me.
Yeah, it's individual specific.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, and then after medical retirement, was it still a long road ahead after that until you were feeling yourself again? Yeah,
I think a lot of us, and I say us, I don't just mean those in the military, but like any human that's pursuing something that, like, their master identity, and they achieve something, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and it wasn't by choice. and maybe it is by choice sometimes, but when you've achieved something and then, okay, now you can't do that anymore, you're faced with that identity crisis. And it's like, well, what do you do? What's next? Like, do I have value? And that was something that was taught to me in a very young age, is like, look, if you're here, you need to provide
Mm.
some way. As a man, you need to provide. You need to provide for your familia. And at that point, I had three sons. I was married at that time. I needed to provide, and I was like, what am I now? Like, what am I going to do? Like, what can I? Everything that I've tried to achieve, I don't have anymore.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a very difficult road for me.
Yeah. That had to be a tough couple of years. That
Yeah.
that transition kind of out in the world alone.
Yeah, it was. But I think a lot of it's just the frame, the way you face it. You frame it. It's like, okay, yeah, it's gonna suck, but I'm gonna make it suck a little less today.
Mm.
Not all of it. All the suck's not gonna go away. That's ridiculous, right? But maybe I can make it suck a little less today. A little less today, because then I would look at my sons and I'm like, I'm not really providing. So I would go back to how I was raised. It didn't matter what type of day my father had, or my abuelitos, my grandfathers, or my uncles, or tios.
Mm.
Didn't matter. When they came home, when my dad came home every day, he did all he could to give us his attention and be happy and joyful. And all he did all day was work his ass off.
Yeah. Then he came home and flipped that switch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he'd come home with the Snickers that we would cut in half, because when it was just two of us, and,
Yeah.
and we would fight over taking who gets the nickel to take off his boots. And I mean, I look back now and I'm like, man, he was smoked. Like,
Yeah.
I know what he was doing that now, but I'm like, man, how did he do that? How did he deal with these two kids that just, I don't know. I like to look back at that, to the foundation, and remember that. And it's like, okay, then I have a purpose. I need to provide. I need to figure it out, and I can do it. Even if I feel like I can't, I have to tell myself I can.
That's powerful stuff too. If you think about most men in the country, they're going to see their kids from 5 to 9 at night. So you have, and that every family's different. Sometimes it's 7 to 9. Sometimes it's 6 to 9 or 6 to 10. But it's really this minute amount of time we're actually going to see them from childhood to high school, and flipping that switch, turning the work off and turning the phone off. Mostly it's just flipping that switch to where they can have your undivided attention. It's hard. I mean, it's really hard. And guys that pull that off, I mean, that's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, it's the I think growing up like I did, the greatest investments that were ever given to me was time, right? Because we didn't have any. I'm saying we didn't have very, we didn't have a whole lot growing up. But that I don't remember. I remember gifts, but what was the ROI on the gifts that my father was able to save up for, my mother and father, like whatever, what's the ROI on that, as opposed to the time that they spent with us? I mean, that's way more. And I can get more stuff. I can't get more time. So trying to remember that for me is like a daily chore. For me is like, all right, I need time. Like, time is my most cherished asset. I think everybody needs to understand that. I want to live a good life every single day, not save up for maybe I'll be around in a year or 2 years. Because one of the blessings of facing your mortality, right? Like the last time I got blown up, I'm like, oh, this is it. This time is it. Not the time I fell on the helicopter. Not the time that, not any other stuff. I'm like, oh, this is the one. Finally, right? And I'm not saying I'm wishing for death. I'm like, okay, I guess this is the one. Then it's not. It makes you think about things different. Like, wow. Like, and then it really made me reflect on all the other times of like, wow, for whatever reason I didn't. Man, I don't have tomorrow. I can hope for tomorrow, but I don't have tomorrow. I have right now.
Yeah.
So I have to remind myself of that sometimes, especially when it comes to time, because there's so much shit to do. I mean, everyone can be super busy, and people that are driven and purpose driven and passionate, I think I'm a pretty passionate guy, have to remind ourselves, like, hey, we got to find that balance and time with your familia. I keep going back to how I was raised, but familia es primera, family's first, and you got to remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So let's transition to what you're doing now. It's pretty amazing, especially after, that story and going through that transition. But you're now the CEO of the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation. How did that happen?
Yeah. Yeah, there's interesting story. So I'm not one of the founders. So what the foundation is, the GWOT Memorial Foundation, we are the congressionally designated charity nonprofit tasked with building a national war memorial in Washington D.C. in our nation's capital. So that's the way our government, the process to build all memorials and museums in Washington D.C. A charity does that, and that's the process. Um, so in 2015, some veterans and family members came together and they're like, "Man, we don't have anything. Maybe we should start something." And they did that. They became official like in 2015. I was at an event. I was speaking at an event, and they approached me afterwards. And they're, "Rod, we need help." I'm like, "Oh, but what? Like, who are you? What are you doing?" And they showed me, and I was like, and they told me what they were trying to do. I'm like, wow, how amazing would it be to remind the decision makers in Washington, D.C. that there's still a war going on and they see this damn thing every single day. And probably more importantly than that, all those that step forward to serve will be recognized, right? Will be honored, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm in. I don't know anything about building a national war memorial, but I'm in. So I joined the board in 2016. 2017, we introduced our first piece of legislation to get an exemption from a federal law that stated a war has to be over for a period of 10 years for a national war memorial to be built. I don't fault them for writing that law because it was written in 1986. No one could have foreseen or forecasted we'd be in this multi-generational war with no end in sight. Never have we existed as a nation where sons and daughters watch their mothers and fathers go off to fight, only to serve in that same war. My oldest son, who's on his 4th deployment right now, was 4 years old when the towers fell. He's watched his mother and his father deploy. I did 21 years, deployed 10 times. His mom did 21 years, deployed 6 times. And now he's on his 4th deployment. And my youngest son, who graduates high school this year, is planning on listening as well.
Crazy.
And that we're not special. It's just apple trees make apples, right? But for me, I was like, yeah, let's do this. So we introduced the bill in 2017, and it swept through the House and Senate. And President Trump signed it in August of that year. That's when this beautiful idea, I was like, okay, now do it. And it's when they handed us the staff, right? And we are the only ones that can do it. No one else can do this. It's like, you got it. All right, run with the ball. And then it's like, oh, how do we, like, what's, so a lot of the board of directors were pretty, some of them, there's a little bit of a transition right after that. I stepped in the leadership role in 2018 and started to build the team you see today on the foundation. And one of the first things I did in 2018 was, all right, let's figure out where it should go. Because for anyone who's been to DC, the National Mall, nothing new has been approved since 2003. Like, there's nothing new been approved. There's been some improvements and additions, but nothing new. There was some stuff that was grandfathered in that was built after 2003, but when they said it's closed, nothing new has been approved. Where they were going to put us was push this memorial in the fabric of the city. Eisenhower Memorial is behind the Air and Space Museum, while the War Memorial is beautiful at Pershing Park, perhaps appropriately, but I mean, how many people know where it is and how many people are going to see it?
Yeah.
But I felt it belonged there, but it's not my memorial. So again, I did discussion groups across the country, speaking with people, and everyone felt it belonged there. So then I met with the various agencies that exist that control this space, a lot of alphabet soup commissions. And I'm like, hey, look, we want to build a reserve. They're like, you can't. I'm like, well, if I pass a bill, we can. They're like, Rod, you just can't. Or are you saying you think I can't? Those are two different things, right? You don't think I can do it. They're like, Rod, look, we're just being honest. It's against the law, because they closed it in 2003. Everybody has tried. This is 2019. Everybody has tried. Nobody's been successful. People with a lot more money, a lot more influence. I mean, no one's been able to do it. We just don't think, it's take 10, 15 years, tens of millions of dollars, and you're not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Not an administration that's going to support this. And these are the people that control the space. These are bureaucrats, not elected officials. They've been there. They've seen it. They know this environment. And I'm like, but if I pass a bill, we can do it. They're like, well, yeah, we can have a conversation. I'm like, okay, cool. All right. Well, and I ended the meeting, short 10-minute meeting. I don't think they were ready for that. But then, 2.5 years later, President Biden signed my bill into law authorizing us to build this in the reserve. And
Yeah.
effectively, I overturned the apple cart at that point,
That's
and
awesome.
everyone was like, what how did, what, which is good to say only because now I not because, hey, look, this is what we did or what I did or I let, no. It's because now this memorial will sit in a place of honor appropriately. Because again, I said, this is not mine.
Mm,
Even with my experience, being my service and being a spouse at one point, I know it's like to stay home with kids when the wife or the spouse goes off to fight.
mm.
Juggling three little monsters. I know what that's like. I know it's like to watch my son deploy to the same regions of Afghanistan that I deployed to, right? Which is surreal. I've been to the Helmand Province twice. His mother had been to the Helmand Province twice.
Crazy.
And watched our son, his very first deployment was the Helmand Province. And I was like, man, what would it have been like for my dad to watch me graduate airborne school and go fight the Viet Cong?
Yeah.
Or my grandpa to watch my father graduate his artillery training in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and go fight Nazis. That's crazy when I say it like that, but
That's
that's
crazy.
what's happening today.
Crazy.
So, because even with my experience, I'm not an expert on the global war on terrorism. I'm not. I'm expert in my familia service, what it meant and what we gave, and how we still deal with it today. But I'm not an expert, so I'm happy that this will be in this spot. So that's kind of that happened in 21, and then been working on the design right now. It's a 24-step process to build a national war memorial museum. Everyone has to go through this. I mean, you name any museum, Smithsonian Museum, or any memorial out there, they all had to do this. We're in those phases right now of working on the design. Should have a design by the end of this year. I got to get it approved to all the agency, the various commissions that exist, who love me, by the way. And yeah, well, some of them do. Some of them don't appreciate me, but it's okay. Then after that, we'll then hopefully be able to start digging by end of 26 and be done by 27.
Mountain Tough is the fitness app trusted by the dedicated. Mountain Tough ethos is backed by, we've always wanted to be the best in the world at helping our customers become more mentally tough. So inside the Mountain Tough app, you're not only going to find all of our physical training programs, but you're going to find additional training as well so that you can stay sharp physically, mentally, spiritually, and nutritionally. The Mountain Tough app also allows you to train no matter where you are, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the Mountain Tough app is going to have programs from beginners all the way up to elite athletes. And all of our programming is structured in a way that you can start with no gear at body weight, and you can go all the way up to programming that is full gear. So you can do that in a robust home gym or your local gym. There's no excuse for you not to start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, Mountain Tough will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything life throws your way. Mountain Tough is offering the Mountain Tough podcast listeners an incredible offer. 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do is use the code MTNPOD to redeem your 6 weeks of training. That'll be a 14-day free trial plus a whole additional 4 weeks of training. Just go to mountaintough.com and enter code MTNPOD for your 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. How much money do you need to raise to make it happen?
So our initial projection, our initial fundraising goal is $110 million. Now, before anyone has like any crazy sticker shock when I say that number, keep in mind the World War II memorial that was built 20 years ago cost almost $200 million. The Martin Luther King memorial, also built about 20 years ago, was $120 million. So based off current market prices, the location that we've secured, some of the environmental factors and all that stuff, right? We brought in some pretty big people to kind of give us some estimates that $110 million is our goal right now.
Got it. And the foundation's doing a lot in addition to the memorial related to just veteran issues and veteran awareness and kind of telling that story. Is that accurate?
Yes. So one of the things that I'm tremendously excited about is providing that national stage, providing that opportunity again in that city of our decision makers to give them a voice. So when the United States pulled out of Afghanistan, right, when all that occurred, everyone remembers what occurred at Abbey Gate, right? I mean, a lot of us were involved in that. I wasn't on ground, but I was involved in other operations and coordinations and things. I mean, I think the entire community came together to try and get people out that we knew and loved. When there was a memorial held at the Iwo Jima Memorial, or at the Iwo Jima Memorial in Washington, D.C., right? They gathered there for the 13 that were killed. Now, 11 of them were Marines. One was an Army psychological operations guy who I happened to have met because him and my son served together on his first deployment. He was my son's friend. And then there was a Navy corpsman. So 13 service members gathered at the Iwo Jima Memorial, which is just spectacular and phenomenal. And the Iwo Jima Memorial has become like the Mecca to my Devil Dog brothers. But that highlights right there that we have nowhere to gather. Where do we go? What do we do as a nation? Like to those that make these decisions, we don't have anywhere to go. We don't have anywhere to gather.
Yeah.
The need is there. The desire is there. There are over 110 war on terror memorials exist within the continental United States, and various municipalities, cities, townships, states, counties support them. I mean, so over 110 and growing. That doesn't count any indoor memorials that exist. That's their outdoor structures. We don't have anywhere to gather. This war has been fought it's an incredibly complex, difficult to define war. There are men and women serving in a combat role that aren't in uniform, that was once performed by an individual in uniform. We're fighting this war that people just can't even really define. And the war on terror, just so we can talk about what is it? It is every named operation after the attacks of September 11th. People think there were two different wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, there's the same executive orders deployed troops to both. The same executive orders are deploying troops to Somalia and Syria and elsewhere, and have been since then. The authorization to use military force signed on September 18, 2001 is still in effect.
Wow.
Right. So no one considers the Operation Overlord, which is the named operation of the D-Day invasion, its own separate war. Then why would anyone consider Operation Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, Inherent Resolve, et cetera, their own wars, right? So the educational aspect is very important, because then when we start getting educational, we start getting the engagement, then we can provide this platform and voice for everybody. And I 100%, I strongly believe, but I know that this memorial is going to save lives.
For sure.
There are studies on the effects of what the Vietnam Memorial did to my father's generation, just those that visited it. I decreased the impacts of post-traumatic stress. But this war is recognizing everyone that served. I talk about the uniform and non-uniform individuals. The very first KIA is a gentleman by the name of Johnny Michael Spann. He was working for the CIA Special Activities Division, part of Team Alpha. I know his widow, Shannon. I also know his team leader, Alex Hernandez, the first casualty. No one ever talks about that.
Yeah.
Department of Labor put out a report in 2019 trying to find out how many non-uniform individuals died serving or supporting the global war on terrorism. We over 7,000 uniformed individuals who have lost their lives. We over 3,400 non-uniformed individuals. That's almost half the number. That's astounding. That I would be shocked if anybody listening to this knows that. So what about those families? I served running alongside, wearing the same stuff, running out on target with folks that weren't in the Army, weren't in the Marines or Navy, but they were doing the job, looking just like me, wearing the same stuff I was wearing, getting blown up and shot at just like the rest of us.
Wow.
No one talks about that. So really telling the whole story of how we've done this, in an inclusive manner, not for just sake of saying the word inclusivity, but telling the entire story, and also recognizing the family service, not just to check the block, but let's recognize it. And then the last thing that's really important is, especially with veterans, veteran issues, those that have served, and if you step foot into that sandbox, You step into that arena, it's going to come home with you. It's going to be with you for life. Sometimes you can see it. Sometimes it's obvious. It's on your face, and sometimes it's not. Most of the time, it's not. So addressing those invisible wounds of war at home, because that war is still here, and a lot of us are still fighting the war, and a lot of us are still losing the war. Of the 55 friends I could name that have lost their life, 10 of them were here, and that's awful. So addressing that, talking about it, being open about it, and having those conversations, and validating the service and sacrifice of this incredibly small percent of our population that still defends us today is going to save lives.
Man. And those are astounding numbers as well, right? Is it like the total, if you account for the military members and the non-military, and then the suicides as well, isn't it up in the 30,000 range?
Yeah, I would say, and that's just known. It's we need to do this. We have to, because it's open ended. I mean, we've lost 5 service members serving this year alone. The 3 guardsmen, reservists from Georgia, and my 2 frogman brothers, right? I knew Chris. I know the older one. I'd met him a few times. And it's crazy. It's just like, man, there's still, but nobody's talking about it. No one knows about it. But being able to do this in our nation's capital for all of us it's gonna do 4 things. We have 4 tenets that guide the foundation. I wrote these tenets in 2019. One is honoring all those that serve. We just talked about that. Heal, provide the opportunity to heal. Healing can be individualistic. It can be, relationship based. It can be, I think, is just as important. Healing as a nation, addressing that. Heal, honor, heal, empower. The 3rd thing. Talked about that too already. Give them a voice. Make them feel validated. No one raises their right hand to do what it is that I did, or their familias for any self-aggrandizement. They're damn sure not making a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
Empower. Let them tell those stories. Make them feel recognized. And the 4th thing is unite. Is remind the nation that, who we were on September 12th, right? And we're an incredibly complex, diverse nation, from various social, economic backgrounds, whatever, beliefs. I mean, but that's where the strength lies. I've fought side by side with people of all walks of life, whatever they identify or think they are, whatever. I don't care. Everyone's always an American, and bullets and bombs don't discriminate, right? They're killing Americans, and that's how we identify, and that's how we look at each other. So I think doing that will help unite us as a nation as well.
And what can our listeners do to help? What are some of the things they can do to help?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I would get in trouble with my comms team if I didn't talk about this, and my development team. They'd be like, "Rod, what the hell?" I'm like, "Oh man, I'm sorry. I got emotional, man. I'm sorry." But talk about it. We were an incredibly small team. A lot of, I've been here. I've been in the foundation the longest. A lot of the other board of directors, they moved on. They're doing great, fantastic things. I'm really proud of what they're succeeding in today. But again, I'm like the roach that just kept staying around. But we were able to finally start growing our team a little bit. So it's just kind of I guess, an excuse way of me saying, not a lot of people know that we're doing this. So talk about it. You, hermano, giving me this opportunity is when I said it was humbling, it's not like, hey, I want people to see my face. Is I get an opportunity to talk about this and share this incredibly sacred mission that I approach with sanctity and reverence. So talk about it. I would ask anybody that's listening and say, hey, look, just find 3 people. We'll Google us, go, see GWOT, GWOT, memorialfoundation.org, find our socials. But then I ask them, hey, tell 2 to 3 people, please. And if they want to get involved by donating their time, talent, or treasure, by all means, let us know. Yeah, there's ways for people to donate. Obviously, I got to raise $110 million in 2 years, because I can't stick one shovel in the ground till I have 110% of construction costs on hand.
Yeah.
So that's a heavy lift. I'll get there. I'm not going to say I'm not scared. It's a lot of money going up. I'm not, none of that. We'll get there. We got a really great team. Just announced a brand new board member, a friend I've been able to develop over the years, President Seal, Nucor Steel, Leon Topalian. We got a great board of directors. So we're going to succeed.
Hmm.
But I want everyone to feel like it's still their memorial. It's our memorial. It belongs to all of us. So talk about it. Follow us. And again, like you were at Winter Strong when that beautiful event happened, right? Like, it was led by Nosler. Hey, we're gonna, sell raffle tickets and give
Hmm.
away like this amazing rifle, right? I was like, I'm not kidding. When he was showing it to me, like my mouth was watering. I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I could have this thing. But Nosler stepped up, and then several other vendors did as well.
That
So
was
like, you know what? I
awesome.
want to be part of that. I want to be part of that. And for me, it was very impactful for me because it's great to see the fabric of America still give a shit,
Hmm.
and they did. What didn't matter if they were a vendor or not. Like everyone got involved, and it meant something to everybody, and that was like very, very. It was powerful for me to be a part of.
Hmm.
So I say that like maybe people are listening, like, hey, I'm not saying start fundraisers. I'm just like talk about it. Like let's remember who we are, no matter what you look like, what language we speak. You're American, and there are men and women out there right now. My son is one of them, currently deployed. Keeping us safe.
Man. Well, our listeners are, certainly a passionate, patriotic community. So I feel strongly that they'll do a great job of talking about it and spreading that message. And anyone can do what Nosler did too at Winter Strong. I mean, anyone can can create a fundraising event at their local community gathering that's going on, and it was great to see that happen, just organic and everyone jumping in and kind of doing what they can. I assume, in addition to talking about it, people can donate directly on your website as well.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I don't call our donors like donors. You guys are all investors. Like we're investors. I want regular people like me to feel like veteran families, like,
Mm.
unless you sold a book or made a movie, you're not wealthy, right?
Hmm.
But it's still ours, and there's always an opportunity to donate and whatever it is they can add, whatever time, talent, and treasure that they feel that they could contribute, and then send out information. Send us stuff. There's something. You know what? I didn't talk to my comms team before this, but I'm going to go ahead and make the decision now, as president and CEO. So, what I want to do is I want to send you a link. If you could push it out to your group. I wish I had it, or maybe we can show it here.
Yeah, we'll get it hooked to the
People can
show.
go to it. Yeah, and when I was talking about we're working on the design, we collecting input from everybody. So
Awesome.
in 2018, I started collecting design input that I've just adding to the data that our design team that we're still building will look at. And I've told them all, like, you're not allowed to pick up your crayons and pencils yet. As the artists that are working on this, I need you to listen to the people.
Mm.
So because I haven't cleared that with the team, but I'm going to make the command decision right now. I'm going to send it to you,
That would
and
be awesome.
what I'll do is I'll send it to you. Let me know when this goes up, and we'll have it open for a period of time. That way, any of the listeners that would mean a lot to me if they just contributed, took the few minutes to like 3 minutes, I think is how long it takes to fill the survey out because your voice is important.
Yeah, definitely get me that link, and we'll get it on this show and let people provide some feedback. That we'll put it in the show notes and blast it out there. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that would be. I don't know why I didn't think about this before, but we're going to do it.
Cool.
Tell them to open it. I'll open it up. We're good.
Well, Rod, as we kind of close down, I did want to ask you about your faith and what it means to you, and kind of when that started and how that happened.
Yeah. So my faith means everything to me. Um, it's fortunate I grew up in a um, very, very, I'm very proud Catholic family.
Mm.
And I was an altar server, growing altar boys. That's what they called us back then. Altar server. Um, all of us were, and it was like mandatory. And it was, all of our houses, we have an altar or ofrendas. Mine is sitting right there. Where I have the 55 names listed. It's it's part of our. I say it's everything, but it's just part of our day. I mean, it's just I can't do that without. I can't go forward without it.
Mm.
But I will say that over time, my faith has been, I have my own, I think we all have our own relationship with the Lord, and mine has, gone back and forth, meaning I feel like I've stepped further away than I should have been, from my faith and beliefs, but I know, it's always there to waiting for me to come back. Right.
Yeah.
So, um, I it's everything. I mean, you're not gonna, and I'm proud of it. I will admit too that, especially, years prior where it wasn't like not popular, it's easy to vilify, especially my church, like Roman Catholic Church. It's the easiest, it's the longest existing Christian church, the longest existing Christian faith. It's the easiest to come after. And I don't want to say I was ashamed of it, but I wasn't so open and outwards about it. But I definitely do a lot more now to try and do so. As a matter of fact, at Winter Strong, I was wearing, I have a rosary that I always wear, different ones. And I was wearing it, and one of the Sorinex workers came over to me. He saw it, and he was like, "Man, that's you wearing?" I go, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And then when I saw him again, he was wearing his.
No way.
He had it, but he had it hidden, and he was wearing his. And I'm like,
cool.
"Man, if that was all I did at Winter Strong, that was worth it." So to tell you how important my faith is, and it's something we do every day. I mean, we with my grandson that I have right now, because his dad's deployed. I read to him. He's learning. He'll be 6 this weekend. Learning the rosary. He doesn't quite know it yet, but it's our foundation.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that, and thank you so much for who you are and what you're doing. The Mountain Tough community is proud of you, and the work that you're doing is amazing. I mean, we need it. America needs it. The country needs it, and we appreciate you and are proud of you. And thanks for sharing the story of kind of how you got there too. Life's crazy, man. You never you never know where we're gonna wind up, and life is a vapor. I mean, tomorrow is not guaranteed, and just getting up every day and being passionate and having a purpose and driving forward towards that purpose is what we can do.
Yeah, I don't think anybody grows up wanting to do what I do right now. Nobody said, someday I want to go build a national war memorial." No. But I think that the Lord has a path, and for whatever reason, I kept staying around, and I keep moving forward, changing direction. I'm still moving forward. Whatever's presented in front of me, I'll face it, and there isn't anything that if you approach everything with a pure heart, pure intent. Without any expected ROI. Like I'm a relationship person. All my relationships, it's not like an investment based thing. It's like, I don't expect anything in return. I just want to give you all that I have. If you approach anything like that, there isn't anything that can stand in your way.
So true. Yeah. Well, thank you, Rod. Appreciate you. And we'll spread the word. We'll tell people. I'll encourage, all our listeners to do the same, and we'll get that link attached to the show, and would love to get some feedback on the artwork and the design. That'd be amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for what you guys are doing. I mean, when I talk about pure of intent, it's, if I was someone asked me like, "Hey, how do you describe the podcast?" I said, "It's pure intent." I would probably say it about you guys as well. So thank you for what you're doing. And again, I'm honored by this opportunity to come here and chat with you, my friend.
Thank you. Man, what a great episode with Rod. Thanks so much for listening. His passion, his desire, his purpose that he is chasing right now for the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation is inspiring. As you can hear in his voice, his sincerity, his authenticity, his drive to do what people told him can't be done, to support everyone who's fought in the global war on terrorism, is inspiring. You can hear it in his voice during today's conversation that he is not going to quit on this mission. He is going to get this mission done. And as Mountain Tough podcast listeners, he described exactly how you can help. How you can help is tell this story tell a couple friends, a couple family members on what Rod is up to with the foundation and why it is so important. So think about that this week. Who can you share this with? Who can you share this episode with? Who can you share the memorial with? And I will put that link that he mentioned in the conversation in the bio of this podcast so that you guys can dive in there as well and give him some feedback on the design artwork that he talked about on today's show. Crush this week, everyone. Have a great week. Thanks so much for listening. Remember that code MTNPOD for 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. And if you want to learn more about the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation, you can check them out on Instagram or YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing to this podcast on the podcast store. And also check us out on YouTube. We've put a lot of new videos on YouTube in the last couple months, and that's at Mountain Tough Fitness Lab. Stay dangerous, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. We'll see you next week.